Hi, we'd like to welcome you all to another webinar designed for public transit agencies. Today we'll be covering how you can leverage GIS technology to meet all of the requirements for the Federal Transit Administration's Safety Management System, as defined under the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan Regulation. I'm Terry Bills, and I'm the Transportation Industry Manager here at Esri. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. And today I'm joined by Justin Kreisinga, an account executive on our public transit team, and Jay Hagan, a solution engineer, also on our public transit team. So, as I mentioned, today we'd like to present an integrated solution designed to address the requirements of FTA's Safety Management System rule. And while most of you are probably familiar with many of these requirements, I suspect that many of you did not envision that GIS could really be the centerpiece of a comprehensive transit safety management system. Our hope is that after today, you will agree with us that GIS is in fact the perfect foundation for an agency-wide safety management system. Before we begin, let me point out that we are recording this webinar. And while everyone will be on mute, there will be time for question and answers at the end of the webinar. Just type your questions into the question box and we'll try to answer as many as time allows. In addition, the slides from today's webinar will be made available, and we'll give you links to a variety of other resources at the end of the webinar. So to start off, let's look at the requirements of that FTA rule. And much of the design really followed from the original National Public Transit Safety Plan that you see that was released in 2017. The larger FTA rule was actually promulgated in 2018, and with the intent of really ultimately directing greater attention to the safety and security of our public transit systems, and to ensure that riders and the staff of a safe and efficient and reliable public transportation system. The goal was to tie transit asset management requirements and a state of good repair to an agency's safety policies to help guide resource and investment decisions for transit agencies. And while not every transit agency had to comply, the largest majority of public transit agencies that received FTA grant funds were required to develop an agency safety plan. And the rule was originally meant to be implemented by July 20th of this year, but has recently been extended to the end of the year. And at heart, the rule was designed to move public transit agencies to a more proactive approach to safety, one that is data and performance driven, and which relies on calculations of risk to help guide resource and investment decisions. The safety management system is really the heart of the agency's safety plan, and has four major elements or components to the overall system. And at the center of the safety management system is the agency's safety management policy. It is designed to be a written document which effectively captures the policies, the goals, and the performance targets for the agency's safety performance. And it explicitly commits an agency to the development and the implementation of the organizational structures and the resources necessary to carry out the safety management processes. As a result, it embodies the agency's commitment to the safety goals, who is responsible, which is typically the top management of the agency, together with a chief safety officer, if the agency has one, that actually leads the program, and also includes how the agency will be measured to demonstrate their accountability. So this policy document is really the agency's responsibility, and is the one component that we leave to each agency. Each of the other components that we address with GIS solutions we'll briefly cover individually. So the first part is really the safety risk management, and that allows a transit agency to carefully examine all of the factors that could cause harm and determine whether the agency has taken sufficient precautions to minimize those risks and those harm, and if further mitigations are necessary. And under a safety management system, the identification of hazards and safety concerns includes not only proactive measures, but also reactive measures such as investigations to ensure that the agency has a comprehensive view of safety risk. This is the first step in the safety risk management process. Safety hazard identification really involves establishing methods or processes to identify hazards and consequences of the hazards to address them before they escalate into incidents or accidents. And there are many sources of information that can be used to identify safety hazards, including employee reporting, which is a critical piece, inspection and accident reports, and customer feedback as well. But the key is to identify as many potential hazards as possible. And then the next step is really to examine the consequence of those hazards to help prioritize the agency's resources and those investments needed to mitigate those hazards. And really the goal is to create a culture of safety where every major hazard to the agency is identified and an attempt is made to prioritize and mitigate each risk. And risk matrices are useful here just as they are in standard asset management risk analysis. And next comes the safety assurance. And safety assurance really ensures that the transit agency can actually implement the appropriate and effective mitigations. The safety assurance is really a never-ending process that monitors the safety performance of the organization. And this is really the performance monitoring and the analysis component of the safety management system. There are really three components of the performance monitoring. The agency should monitor its operations to identify any safety risk mitigations that may not be as effective as they should, to conduct investigations of safety events, to identify the causal factors, and to monitor the information reported through any internal safety reporting programs. And this is really designed to set up a process of continuous improvement. And finally is the safety promotion. And much as the title indicates, the agency must have a program to effectively communicate the safety priorities of the agency, and as a way that employees are made aware of safety concerns at both the organizational level as they relate to their own duties and responsibilities. There are two main components of the safety promotion. The first is the requirement to set up a safety training program for all employees responsible for safety. And that also includes the agency's contractors. And the second component requires that the safety and safety performance information is communicated throughout the agency's organization. This really helps to focus everyone on the performance goals and understanding how well the agency is doing with respect to those performance goals and on safety. So now let's see actually how those processes get translated into a safety management solution. I'm going to initially turn it over to Justin Kreising, who will walk us through that application and that solution. Justin.
All right. Thank you, Terry, and good afternoon, good morning. Thank you for joining. We know that within a transit agency, safety is really paramount, right? And so as Jay and I head out and visit a lot of customers as a team of two and talk to public transit agencies, we'd like to uncover and understand some of the challenges and the issues that you all face. And we know there are many. There's a myriad of challenges that you face on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, given current circumstances, that's even heightened. But these are just some of them, and some of the things that we'll address here as you see some of the demonstrations. It's by no means a comprehensive list, but these are some of the things that we do see on a kind of a continuous basis. And some of that around safety is, do we even have the ability to kind of report those safety hazards, right? In order for us to address the safety concerns that come up, we have to be able to report on those things, and once they're identified. If you're using a paper-based form, as you likely know, there are issues that can arise from that, from accurate record keeping to even getting things lost in the shuffle, right? Once you've got those potential safety concerns identified, well, you have to be able to take care of those things, right? You got to mitigate those issues before they hopefully turn into an event, and there could be damage to equipment and potentially life-threatening issues as well. So you want to take care of those issues as quickly as possible. And at the end of the day, as you're mitigating these issues and kind of addressing those, do you have a view into how you're doing, right? Some of those metrics on, hey, here's how many issues we had, here's where we're at now. Are we doing better? Are we doing worse? And you got to report that up the chain in many circumstances. So today, as you're going to see through the demonstrations, we're really, if there's anything for you to remember and to come away from the demonstrations with in your mind, like Terry had just talked about, the solution that you'll see today meets the FTA requirement for a safety management system. A really interesting and kind of unique component is it promotes safety across your organization, right? You want to get everyone on board with reporting safety issues and concerns. So there's a way to kind of promote that and do that. And then really after you have all of that that data and those things you've collected and kind of solved, you want to be able to analyze that data, right? You want to be able to analyze it and then really make those corrective actions at the end of the day. So I'm going to turn it over to Jay, and he's going to show you what this solution looks like in action, and I think you'll get pretty excited about it.
All right, thanks, Justin.
You bet.
Okay, so again, this is a comprehensive solution, and it's built around kind of tracking, mitigating, and assessing hazards and events that have taken place at your agency. So I'd like to start off here looking at our transit safety dashboard. So this gives us up-to-the-minute updates on trends that are happening within our agency. So I'd like to start on the right side and just point out that we're tracking the number of hazards that have been submitted. And we're also seeing trends here. We can see that we're seeing a lot more hazards reported over the last 90 days. We can also see some of these are fairly high and serious risk, but we're also closing these out in a pretty timely fashion. Now you might look at that and say, well, these are up. Is that a bad thing? I would argue that no, and Terry mentioned this, is we want to create this culture in which you feel comfortable reporting hazards. And that's how we mitigate that risk, is by having people report hazards. So, I think it's a good thing that we're seeing these numbers up. People feel comfortable reporting these risks that they're seeing. On the other side, we have events. So these are accidents, incidents, and occurrences that have happened. So something actually took place. A bus was hit by a vehicle, for example. That could be an example of an accident. Here we're seeing that those numbers are trending downward. And of course, this is what we want to see here: less events, less injuries, and then we're closing these out as well in a timely fashion. And by creating this culture of reporting hazards, that should in turn lower the number of events that you're seeing over time if you're doing this right. So how did we get to this point? So, our transit agency here, we're seeing good results. Well, we implemented a comprehensive safety management system. So let's walk through some of the components of this. I'm going to start off here, and you can think of this as kind of your agency's safety landing page or safety hub page. So anyone in your agency can come in here and they can get information about safety topics. They can also see the status of certain metrics. So here we can see that we have 7 closed hazards, we have 1 open hazard. The components of the SMS requirements. So Terry went over these: safety risk management, safety assurance, safety promotion, and your safety management policy. Today's demonstrations are going to focus on these first 3 topics: risk management, assurance, and promotion. And I would argue that by supporting these first 3, you're in turn implementing your safety management policy. So these first 3 kind of are supporting that 4th topic there. You can provide materials here. So if you want to link to your agency's safety plan and make that available to anyone in your agency, you can provide that here. Okay, so let's start to think about some of these workflows, and let's start with safety risk management. And this is about identifying, assessing, and mitigating hazards. So as we scroll down, we can see here that we have a number of different options for identifying hazards. We're going to give our employees a number of ways that they can submit hazards. One way would just be to simply call or email, and that might be a typical workflow in a transit agency now. You could call up the safety department or maintenance or whoever might be overseeing safety at your agency, or email them and say, hey, I've identified this hazard. But we're also going to provide some ready-to-use applications that folks can leverage. One of these is this transit road hazard identification application. And this is a native app that works on a mobile device. We refer to it as a big button application. And what I mean by that is when you launch the application, you just see a list of buttons that you could select pre-configured hazards. And it's going to allow your transit service managers, or potentially even drivers who are out in the field driving the routes, if they see a hazard, they can simply just press a button and that's going to get reported. It's going to log the location, what the hazard is. It's even going to provide the opportunity to include a photo if they'd like to. But another way would just be to provide a transit hazard report application. And we could launch that right here. I could fill out the report here in my browser, and that's going to get submitted. But I'd like to show kind of what I think might be a more typical workflow. And that might be somebody who's working out in the field or in a garage, and they're going to identify something. They may not have access to a computer. How might they go through this process? Let's take a look at this hazard workflow. And one thing I want to point out here is you're seeing a couple of different roles here. So some employee is going to submit a hazard that's passed to a safety manager, and then there's some workflows between somebody who's doing mitigation and then analysis. At your agency, all of these roles might be one person. So don't think, well, I don't have a safety analyst or I don't have a safety manager. Just think about the workflow here. So these could be separate roles, or these could all just be handled by one person. So let's start off with this employee hazard submission. So for this part of the demonstration, I'm going to take on the role of a mechanic in the garage, and I see some type of an oil spill in the garage. So that poses a safety risk. Somebody could slip on that and get injured. So how might I report that hazard? Well, one thing I could do is I could pull up my mobile device and I could scan a QR code. And let's say we've posted QR codes throughout the garage. Let me go to my mobile device here. And I'm going to launch my camera. And here you can see I have a QR code. All I have to do is scan this if I want to report a hazard. And it asks me if I want to launch this page. So this is opening that hazard reporter application. And very quickly here, I can report my hazards. The first thing I'm going to do is submit my location. The date is pre-populated. I'll set the time. The type of hazard I see, so I see an unsafe condition. I can provide a description. I can also take a photo and include that as well. Let's include a photo. And then we give our employees the opportunity to report this anonymously. So if they don't want their name included, they have that option. But in this case, I'll provide my contact information. I'm an employee. I'll provide my ID, and I could submit that. And that's all there is to it. So now I can get back to my job. This didn't take much time. All I had to do is pull out my mobile device, report the hazard, and I can get back to work now. So we've done the hazard submission. That's not going to get passed off to a safety manager. So let's take a look at the safety manager application. So as a safety manager now, I have an application for tracking the status of hazards and events. And really what my role is here is to assess the risk of that hazard and then assign somebody to either investigate that hazard or potentially mitigate it if possible. Let's look at our hazards. So here you can see I have a map and I have a list of hazards and their status. So this is the one that we had has just been reported. I can see here unsafe conditions, it's a hydraulic oil spill, and the status is open, and I can see the location. So the first thing I need to do is assess the risk of this. So let's edit this record. I can see here that a hazard ID has been automatically assigned. It's picked the location for me. I'm going to give this a risk score, and this is based on that matrix that Terry had shown, and really all this is showing is the likelihood that something would happen, the frequency of an event happening from this, and the potential consequences. So a 2B means that it's fairly likely something will happen and it could be fairly bad. Somebody could slip, fall, get injured. We don't want that. So we'll give this a high risk value. And at this point, that's all I need to do. I'm just assessing the risk pre-mitigation. Now, the next thing I need to do is assign somebody to go out in the field and either investigate this or take care of the hazard. So I'm going to create a work assignment now. And we're going to send somebody in the field here. So my work order ID has been passed through. My assignment type, I'm going to assign somebody to do cleanup because it looks like this is an oil spill. I'm going to assign it to one of the employees. I'm going to give this a high priority. I'd like it done today, within the next couple of hours. My description has been passed through, so I don't even have to populate that. And my location here is included as well. So I'll create that work order. Okay, so going back to our hazard workflow, the hazard was submitted, the safety manager assessed the risk, and now they're assigning somebody to go out and mitigate that risk. So let's take a look at that workflow now. We're going to go back to our mobile device now. I'm going to close this out. And let's go to Workforce. So here in Workforce now, as the person who's going to be doing the mitigation here, I can see that I've been assigned this assignment for cleanup, so I can click on that. Of course, I can see the description here and any notes that have been provided. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to accept this assignment now. And I'm going to go to that location now, and I'm going to take a look at what's going on here. So here I can see the hazard that's been submitted. It's a hydraulic oil spill. I can see the risk score that's been assigned to it. So let's say I get to the location, I've identified the problem, I took care of it, I cleaned it up. So let's update this record now. So again, I could include a photo of what I've cleaned up, but I need to provide a post-mitigation score. I'm just going to assign it an F because there is no more risk. I cleaned it up. I eliminated the problem. We'll just say oil leak from barrel. And we'll go ahead and close out the status. And we are finished with that. So you can see it's very simple to come in and track the progress and the status of these hazards. So now I've as somebody who's doing the mitigation, I've cleaned up the issue here, and that's going to get passed back to our safety manager. So coming back to our safety manager application, if I just refresh this here now, I can see now that this is now closed out. I can see the post-mitigation score. And what's really great about this is it's also tracking how long it takes to resolve this. And that's something really important and something you want to monitor is how long is it taking us to get to these hazards? Are we doing better than we have in the past? Are we doing worse? Why is it taking long in certain cases? But just being able to track that resolution time is really important.
And Jay, I think it's also important to point out, so all of the solutions that you're seeing and the workflow that Jay is going through here, the awesome thing about it, I mean, you might be thinking, oh man, this looks like a lot of custom stuff that's involved with kind of putting this together, but these are all COTS configurable solutions, no custom coding involved here. And like on that survey, I mean, the survey can be configured however you want, but really as simple as possible. Again, you want to create that that safety culture, and so you want to encourage people to report on things. And the best way to do that, as you likely know when you get a survey, is the fewer questions as possible to get to the end goal is likely going to make sure that people are going to submit those hazards and things like that. So I think keeping it simple and again, it's all configurable.
That's a great point. Yeah, thanks, Justin. So coming back to our reporting applications here, we've talked a lot about hazard reporting. Another component of this is event reporting and tracking. So anytime an accident, incident, or occurrence happens, you need to be able to report on that, track its process, and oftentimes send that report to the FTA or some other body. So Justin's going to talk a little bit about the event workflow.
Yeah, so the event workflow, we're not going to get into the workflow in detail because really it's pretty similar to reporting, a hazard before it becomes an event. But the kind of the additional things that's included there is the investigation process. So anytime an actual event takes place, as you likely know, whether there was damage or someone got hurt, there has to be an investigation, and then that has to be reported to the FTA or state. And so the cool thing about the event reporter is it will build that for you as you go through the workflow. And as most of you know, producing that final report is such a pain in the neck. The cool thing is it cranks out the report for you. As you can see here, that workflow goes through investigation, and then it generates this report, which is really awesome. I think this would be a key thing for many of you, so you don't have to fill out this report every time by hand. It generates that report, and then for whatever contact you have in whatever governing body, it will send that off to them automatically, which is pretty awesome. And then kind of with that event workflow, kind of a key differentiator is really the analysis piece, and Jay's going to get into that in more detail here.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. So yeah, I think what we've built here kind of even goes above and beyond some of the requirements here. Of course, you need to be able to create this report, but we can really take this a step further and do analysis and start to get at maybe what are some of the problem areas that we're seeing? Are there things that we could do to help prevent some of these events? So let's go back to our hub page here. So, we talked a lot about risk management, identifying, assessing, and mitigating. A lot of this reporting and analysis falls under safety assurance. That's kind of the second component here, measuring, monitoring, and evaluating these hazards and events as they're coming in. So let's take a look at some examples of this. I'm going to start off here. I'm going to start off here in Insights, and this is a web-enabled tool. Again, we're connecting to an existing data source. So what's great about this entire workflow is I'm not creating a new data set each time I'm going through this process. I'm connecting to one sole source of data. That's my system of record. but I'm able to use it throughout the process, whether that's sending somebody out in the field to mitigate an issue, whether it's for the safety manager to assign that work, or in this case, to do some analysis. So here we're looking at events. So we're talking about hazards, and now we're talking about events. So these are events that are taking place throughout my agency service area. And these are just different visualizations of that data that's getting reported. So for example, if I'm interested in looking at preventable accidents, by simply clicking on this, this is going to update each one of my cards here to show those accidents that are preventable. I can slice and dice this data a number of different ways. So if I'm interested in looking at events by month, I have that here, events by day and time of day. So that way I could look for particular trends, maybe by associated with time. I could also look at the relationship between accidents and other variables. So for example, we're tracking what the weather was when an accident occurred. So if I'm interested in looking at those accidents that happened during cloudy weather, by clicking that, I can see that about half of my accidents happened during cloudy weather, and then I can see the time of day and the location of those types of accidents. There's a lot of great ways to investigate your data here. Now, another thing that we can bring into this, though, is some really advanced spatial analysis. So here I can see where those accidents are, but I have analytical tools right here at my fingertips. So for example, if I want to calculate a density and see where these accidents are clustering, I can do that. So I could just run this density, or in this case, I could weight these by some attribute. So maybe I want to weight these by the amount of damage, the cost of the incident or accident. I could weigh these, and that's going to apply more weight to those accidents that cost more, and I could run that. Well, I've already run that analysis, so for time's sake, we can look at the results here. So just by running that analysis, I can see there's a few locations where some of these events are clustering, but I can see right here in the downtown area, we have a pretty strong cluster. So let's investigate that a little more closely. So as I zoom in here, these two maps are synced, so I can see what's going on here. I can see that there are a large cluster of events happening right here. So let's take a look and see if we can figure out what's going on here. I'm going to select these events here. And when I select these, this is going to update all of my cards to show just these events that I've selected. So I can see most of these are preventable. I can see when they're happening. But looking at the initial report, the word bicycle is coming up almost every single time. So something's going on here with bicycles. And if I were to zoom in on this a little tighter, maybe not quite that tight, it's kind of hard to tell at this resolution, but there is a dedicated bicycle lane here. So we're having some type of a issue with our buses are conflicting with bicyclists in this corridor. So just by investigating my data, running some analysis, I found a problem location, and by just simply querying that data, I was able to figure out what an issue was, and now I could start to think about ways I could mitigate that. And what's interesting about this particular location is this is actually an area that the city of Denver did some work to protect bicyclists. This is what that corridor looked like a few years ago. You can see here there's just a small little bicycle lane. Not very well protected. This is what that corridor looks like now. They installed these bollards here and created an entire dedicated lane here that's really protected from traffic. So you can see just by doing that type of analysis, you can identify issues, and you're going to be able to take some steps to mitigate that problem. Some other things that we're able to do here, we can, so if I need to run this analysis on a regular basis, so say every month I want to take a look at what trends are happening, everything I've done here has been stored in this analysis view as a model. So all I need to do is update my data, and I can rerun this entire set of analysis, and all of these cards are going to update. So that way I could look at the latest trends at any given time.
Yeah, I think that's such an important part of this tool. And again, as you guys can see up there at the top of the screen, like this is all running in a browser. So Jay is doing all of this kind of in-depth analysis in a browser. And then, like he said, if you are dealing with safety issues, you feel like you're mitigating these, you're taking care of them, but you want to come back, like you said, every month or every 6 months and really see how you're doing, you don't have to rebuild all of these inputs every time. You can just go and rerun that model and not have to reinvent the wheel. So you want to be able to compare apples to apples, and that's pretty awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, this could be a big time saver. Once you've figured out the analysis you want, all you need to do is just update your data and you're good to go. Okay, so another part of the process here is just tracking the status here. So for that, we're going to come back to the dashboard. This is what we initially started with here, so we can see. In fact, we can see the number of hazards has increased because we submitted a hazard earlier, but we closed that one out, so our closed percentage is going up. I can filter these any number of ways. If I'm interested in particular event types or modes, whatever that might be. But if I want to dive in even further and learn more about, let's say, events, I go to my events tab. And this is giving me a comprehensive view of events. I can see the number of injuries we've had, the status. So here I can see that we're closing these out, trends by hour and day of the week, but then also some of these individual accidents. I always have access to the data that's been collected. So, clicking on one of these, this happens to be one of those bicycle accidents downtown. I have access to the summary, the operator, the number of people injured, the corrective action plan, the executive summary. It's all right here at my fingertips. I can also connect to that event report. So Justin mentioned that report that gets automatically generated. I have access to that right here, so I can read the report. And again, this is what you might send off to the FTA or some other governing body as part of your reporting process. Similar here for hazards. Let me refresh my view here. But I get a similar view for hazards in which I can see where the hazards have been identified, look at the risk score pre-mitigation and post-mitigation. So this tells me we're doing a good job. A lot of these are high and serious pre-mitigation, but post-mitigation, we've actually eliminated most of these. So that shows that we're actually getting to these and we're mitigating the actual risk here. The hazard, what type of hazards are being reported, hazards by day of the week, and again, just like with the events, I have access to the entire hazard report right here. So finally, we've talked about risk management, safety assurance. Let's talk a little bit about safety promotion, and this is about communication and training. And for that, let me just refresh our hub page here. Really what that is that's what this is. This is our safety landing page. You can almost think of this as your digital bulletin board. I think a lot of transit agencies, especially in the garage, probably have a safety bulletin board, and that may or may not get updated on a regular basis. Well, think of this as your digital bulletin board. And what's great about this is this can update itself in many ways. So here, this was 1 in 7, it's now 1 in 8 because we closed out one of our hazards. So this is updating itself in real time. Of course, we're giving employees access to the agency safety plan. All of the reporting tools are right here and available to the staff that need it. We can even provide access to that dashboard. So if you want your employees to be able to track the progress, that's all here as well. We can also highlight and recognize folks for their good work and safety. So you can have an employee safety spotlight here. Providing links for resources for different roles. So maybe training resources for those that work in the garage or facilities or rail or even safety videos. Safety events. So if you have workshops or other types of events for your staff, you can track those and make those available here so that folks are able to join and participate. And here we can see, here's today's webinar. We've added that as an event. So here I can come in and I can get details about the event. In this case, this is a digital event, so I have the link here to join the event, but these could be in-person meetings as well. Then finally, the ability to sign up and be able to follow this hub page so that whenever something gets updated here or a new event is added, it will actually send you an email or contact you in another way so that you're always up to date on safety events and the status of safety happenings in your agency. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Justin to wrap up.
Great. Thanks, Jay. I'm sure if we could hear our attendees, you'd be getting a big round of applause. Isn't Jay great, everybody? No, that was awesome. So again, just to kind of reiterate and highlight, some takeaways for all of you that are listening in. The solution you just saw, it definitely meets the FTA requirement. And I think, meeting requirements are obviously very, very key. You have to do them, but more than just meeting the requirement, again, we want to be able to promote that safety culture within your organization. We want people to kind of value safety and put that as kind of topmost priority. And I think, what Jay showed you with that hub site is really a place where people can collaborate around safety. Some of the interactive components that were there, like highlighting safety person of the quarter or the month. I think that's pretty neat. It creates kind of that a little bit of a competitive situation where, like, hey, I'd like to be someone that really promotes safety within our agency. So that hub environment, that collaborative space is really where you can do that. And a cool thing about that is it can bring in some of your current processes, the way you do things, right? Maybe you do have a safety hotline. Well, you would want to highlight and put that on there. So really promoting that safety across your organization, right? In addition to just meeting the requirement. And then really, like he was showing with the insights demonstration, is analyzing that safety data after you've gone through and you've addressed it by doing some investigations and mitigating those problems. Well, you want to be able to continue to get those reported issues down and taken care of and resolved as quickly as possible. So those are kind of the pillars of the solutions that you saw today. And yeah, I hope you would consider looking, kind of more in depth at these solutions.
All right, great. Thanks, Justin and Jay. And so now we encourage all of you to type your questions into the question box, and we'll open it up to questions. And already there were a few. Justin and Jay, can you really sort of talk about the different ways that agencies could actually implement this type of a safety management system?
Sorry, I had to take myself off mute. Yeah, so one of the ways that an agency could do that is they can contact us, and Terry will put up some contact information here at the end, and we'll send some information out if you want to be contacted. But what we would like to do is connect with you, understand some of your needs in terms of how you want to implement or need to implement the safety solution, and then we can work with you to build that out.
Okay, and there was another question really sort of along the same lines, again, how to get started. So some of these solutions are actually available on the ArcGIS for local government template solution sites. Others may require some degree of configuration for the agency. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So there are some of the downloadable templates on our solutions at arcgis.com under local government. We have a transit specific space where you can do that. And then they're configurable. So using your data, they're configurable that way. Like Terry mentioned, some of them, like what Jay showed, are a little bit more configured to some specific things, like the hub site that you saw, and then using ArcGIS Insights. So those take some kind of additional implementation support that we can also provide on the Esri side.
Okay, great. And so there was also a question, and maybe this is for you, Jay. Is this in ArcGIS Pro, or is this what software platform does most of this run in?
Great question. So this works. Everything we did today took place using WebGIS. So you can use what I used today was ArcGIS Online. You could also deploy this if you have ArcGIS Enterprise. So if you want to run this on your own infrastructure, you can do that as well. But we showed no pro or desktop tools. If you wanted to use the solution deployment tool that Justin had mentioned, which will deploy some of these configurable solutions, it won't get you everything that we showed today. That would require pro to do that launch.
Okay, and Jay, maybe another one for you. All of the solutions that we're showing today, can they receive inputs from other systems and export to other systems? Maybe you can talk about the sort of the configurability and the architecture as well, the open architecture. And
yeah, that's something that we hear a lot, because many agencies already have some kind of a system that's maybe doing some of this work already. So the answer is yes, we can integrate with other systems. We have an open platform. We would use our APIs in order to connect to whatever system that might be. On the back end, a lot of this is reading from a database. So most existing safety systems you have probably are reading from some database as well. So usually we can go in there and extract that data or connect to it directly. Of course, the answer that's going to vary, depending on your agency's specific circumstances and setup. But generally speaking, we are able to connect to other outside systems.
Okay, and another one for you, Jay. Could this be? You were showing analysis with insights. Could you also use Power BI as well as another way of doing some analysis?
Yeah, absolutely, you could. So we have a plugin, an ArcGIS plugin for Power BI, so you could connect to that same feature service there, pull that in and do your analysis there. So really, Insights was just one example of a tool that you could use. You could do your analysis and really any number of different applications. But Power BI would be one that we can connect directly to.
Okay, and so for a fairly small agency, what's the minimum sort of configuration or software licensing that they would need to be able to implement this solution? As you know, there are a lot of fairly small agencies, not very large staff. What would be really required, the minimum sort of software configuration?
Yeah, so really on the software side of things, so like Jay was showing, ArcGIS Online, he didn't use any desktop tools as he mentioned, so you don't necessarily need desktop licensing for that. ArcGIS Online, you do need, he showed, if you're going to use Insights, then Insights would be a tool that you would have there as well. He showed some dashboards. A lot of those are included. Some of the configurable apps are included with, subscription. It would just really depend on the configuration of the tools that we would have. So, I guess I don't want to give a cop-out answer as it varies, but it really does vary depending on, how you want to implement that.
Yeah,
also some ArcGIS Hub.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to add. So I think at the core, you're going to need named user licensing, whether that's ArcGIS Online or Enterprise, to give folks access. And then, yes, you're going to need Insights and Hub licensing to do the Hub page and the event tracking.
Okay, and there was another question said, with ArcGIS Online, does it have to be an organizational account?
Yes. Yeah, you wouldn't be able to deploy this with the free account.
Okay, all right. And let's see. Okay, and I think, again, questions really relating to the small agencies and how to get started. And so I would encourage any of you to reach out to, and we'll actually give you Justin and Jay's contact information here. I would encourage you to reach out to them. They'd be happy to answer really any questions and can sort of give you greater advice in terms of how you can get started and the different options and so forth. So in addition, we have links to both the FTA's, not only the original rule, but also resources that the FTA makes available, and then the site for the ArcGIS for local government, transit, and the safety site, where again you can see some of the freely downloadable solutions designed for transit safety. And again, for some of the smaller agencies, please reach out. Justin and Jay would be happy to walk you through how you can really get started. So with that, I think we've pretty much answered all of the questions. Justin, Jay, any final comments before we close out?
I guess just the only comment I would have is, even if you're a small agency, please reach out and connect with us. We do work with a lot of small agencies as well, and we could work together to see what would fit for you.
All right. Well, again, we want to thank everyone on the line for joining us today, and we hope you'll join us in June for the next installment of our public transit webinar series. We hope that you found this to be useful, and this webinar will be posted on our website within about 3 or 4 days. Along with all of the slides that you saw today. So again, thank you for joining today, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. And with that, we'll close off. Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.